Welcome to A Pleasant Solution, Embracing an Organized Life. I'm your host, certified life coach, professional organizer, and home life expert, Amelia Pleasant Kennedy. And I help folks permanently eliminate clutter in their homes and lives. On this podcast, we'll go beyond the basics of home organization to talk about why a clutter-free mindset is essential to an aligned and sustainable lifestyle. If you're someone with a to-do list, if you're managing a household, and if you're caring for others, this podcast is for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to episode 41, Supporting Mothers, Fertility through Postpartum with Elise Bowerman. Elise Bowerman, founder of Birth Humanity, is an international prenatal and postnatal yoga teacher and is a practicing birth and postpartum doula. She believes peace on earth begins with how women and babies are cared for at their most vulnerable time in life, birth. By helping mothers learn how to embrace the sacred rites of passage they naturally experience through pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum, these phases will hold great value and strength rather than fear or weakness. Globally, Elise provides one-to-one virtual personal guidance sessions and offers in-person fertility and pregnancy classes in West Bloomfield, Michigan. As a founder of Michigan's first registered prenatal yoga school, Elise amplifies the reach of her message by educating other yoga teachers who can get the knowledge and confidence to teach women in pregnancy and recently postpartum through her virtual continuing education course, Prenatal and Postnatal Yoga Teacher Foundations. As a mother of two, Elise also centers her family first, and earlier this year, in 2023, celebrated 15 years of marriage with her husband, John. I encourage you to check out her website, Birth Humanity, for loads of helpful tools and resources, including some great pre- and postnatal yoga classes. Enjoy. It is my pleasure to welcome my dear friend, Elise Bowerman, to the podcast today. You and I have known each other for, I don't even know how long, but we met in Michigan when our kids were small. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about all sorts of things from being small business owners to motherhood to midlife and anything in between.
Yeah, being in the sandwich generation.
Yes, that as well. Yes, caring for parents. What a journey. Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So tell everyone just a little bit about you. And welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Amelia, for having me. It's such an honor and privilege when I get to hang out and talk to my friends on their podcasts. And I just love the synergy of us women supporting each other because there's so much space for all of us. So it's really an honor. So thank you for having me. And I'm excited to get in touch with your group of people too, your community, and touch base that way. So my name's Elise, and as you introduced me, I live in Michigan, where I'm a native too, and I have a 13-year-old son and 11-year-old daughter right now. And we are in the midst of raising our children and also taking care of our parents, as I bonded with Amelia over, and also having our own businesses and developing that voice and sense of self. And my business is focused on women and centered in the childbearing years. And I'm sure I'm going to be stepping into the menopausal years of support as well, but not right now, but I'm sure not too far along.
It's all interrelated. We are on this continuum together.
Yeah. And the wiser I get with years, right? The privilege of getting years and years into life. We as women, especially, are constantly going through phases. We evolve continuously. I mean, all humans do, but women, we have these sacred times of our hormones changing, of our life cycle, of attention and focus shifting. And I've been centered on prenatal and postnatal yoga practices and now offering fertility practices. And as I step into like my 40s and seeing what's happening to me and my friends and the wisdom of my older friends, what's happened to them through menopause, it really has highlighted we need more talk about and support, like from one another, wise women to wise women, to hold space for these sacred times in life. Because when we resist them, that's when more discomfort, greater misunderstanding happens, and not accepting our changing body. And there can be a domino effect of that non acceptance by trying to avoid it or resist it with different maybe interventions or just not addressing things that need to be addressed for health reasons.
Yeah, I love that point because we often suffer in silence, or we sort of chat about it with our friends, but not necessarily always with the intention of solution finding or finding what works and aligns with what we believe in and how our things are showing up within our home. So I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Before we dive into Birth Humanity, which is your business and all the wisdom that you will share with the audience, I'd love to take a step back to your childhood, if you can remember, and just talk about ways that organization showed up for you as a young person.
Yeah, this is such a wonderful question that I so appreciate you asking your guests as I listen to your podcast. And everyone's story is uniquely different, but relatable. And so, reflecting on my own, the organization for me as a child was everything had a particular place. I was very orderly and in control that way of like reflecting, back on it. It was a way to control and predict a safe space and place for me. And our whole house was kind of like that too. It was all very orderly. We had the junk drawer, of course, but truly like an orderly home. And that really was ingrained in me, especially as the firstborn. I have one younger brother, that's it. But that role of the stereotypical firstborn was really bred into me and ingrained into me, of orderly, of predictability, the control. And today that still reflects in my life.
Yeah. And I'm curious what kind of feeling translated from that organization, predictability, and orderliness. How did it feel in your home?
Yeah, it felt more safe, I guess, with not having a lot of, like, my parents weren't even remotely kind of hoarders, or anything. So there was always predictability and security in that sense of just where things are in organization. And then in the invisible organization of like daily life from a young age, like sixth grade for sure. But I think it really started in like fifth grade. I woke myself up in the morning. My dad would, just sometimes make sure that I was awake before he left for work. But my mom just kind of slept in. I mean, she didn't kind of, but she would sleep in. And I was the one that got our household, like my brother and I, I made sure my brother was up and we were ready. And, it was the time of when we lived in a neighborhood where we walked to school. And so we'd walk to elementary school to middle school and until I could finally drive in high school. So I was the one that was always doing that invisible work of making sure like I was up, I was ready, and didn't really have that helping hand of, having more of I had a calm morning because I would wake up early with enough time. I'm one of those people that like, if I'm early, I'm on time. If I'm on time, I'm late. If I'm late, I'm like, I feel guilty.
Yeah. And I love that you said the invisible work of getting yourself up
Mhm.
and out, because what it sparks for me is that mothers, women, we show up in different ways, and your mother chose
Mhm.
to sleep in.
Yeah.
And as a result, you learned a different set of skills
Mhm.
and move forward very successfully through late elementary into middle school, and probably developed your own internal sense of time and routine as a result of going through that and doing that invisible work and ensuring that your brother got that where he needed to be, I'm sure.
Yes.
I don't know if he appreciates and acknowledges that today, but
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I'll have to talk to him about it, see if he remembers what his perspective was.
yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things, but I think it kind of gave me a sense of maybe too much need for independent, or maybe need isn't the right word, but like that too overly independent sense of self, where it is hard for me to trust people and to rely on someone else. Like even my husband and I have been married for 15 years, and it really takes great conscious effort for me to let my emotional guard down and to trust that somebody's going to follow through on X, Y, or Z. Even though he's fine, it's totally my story.
Yeah. So, Elise, I would love to talk to you now about your work with Birth Humanity, and specifically around the doula services that you offer, the partnership that you have supporting women, especially around conception, birthing, and the importance of trusting yourself through this process. And before we chat, I really want to acknowledge that you and I both know that having the space and the time to even think about conception and healing and birthing is a privilege that not all women have in their lives. For
Mhm.
example, I was reading some statistics earlier around fair play, and there was a quote that 1 in 4 women, so 25% of women, end up returning to work within the first 2 weeks of having given birth. And I can imagine how the body feels at that point.
Yeah.
Right. So it is a privilege to have time and space to think about conception and birthing, but you have wisdom around why it's important to listen to your inner knowing.
Yeah. And thank you for acknowledging all of that, because it's absolutely true. And I've worked with so many women that work in more masculine career fields where they will lose their position in the line that they're in if they take anything more than 2 weeks. And it's really discouraging and sad, and not the way that it ought to be in our amazing country that we live in. And there is still time and moments, because I believe the little things in life are the things that add up and make the most impact in our daily lives. And I know that you've reflected on this in past podcasts too, of organizational tips too. It's the little things, just the everyday, maybe moments. And by little, I mean like sometimes it's when you're multitasking of washing the dishes and doing nothing else but washing the dishes and letting your mind wander and go. And even if that's through the list of to-dos, but to release it out and through, but to know that washing the dishes is enough. And when we give ourselves that time and space to be like, what I'm doing is enough for now, it provides a little bit more elasticity and space in our minds to have the ability to reflect. It's on a deep subconscious level because we're not really bringing out the subconscious to the conscious at that point in time. But it's understanding that we can only go at such a certain pace, and to acknowledge the little things in life really make a difference. And in my experience with like group gatherings of, if you can go to a pregnancy yoga class or workout class or childbirth education class, sometimes they're offered within hospital settings or outside of hospital settings. You can find providers, and those spaces help set education, number one, of, what to truly expect in a physiological birth and how you could probably care for yourself and baby. And if there's a partner involved, they can assist and support with education and knowledge and tools that are realistic and not like of this space of like, what is birth? Like, well, it's natural, so it'll probably come naturally. Probably not.
Yeah. There are a lot of assumptions that are made out there about women and what will turn on and what is the right way to sort of work through this mysterious process. But you are a doula as well.
Yes.
Right. So you help guide women through this whole journey, right?
Yes. So to just clarify, there are 3 types of doulas. There's birth, postpartum, and end of life doulas. So I'm a birth and postpartum doula. So I help before birth to get some meetings in and just to kind of have every doula, birth doula, every doula operates a little bit differently. We have our priorities, of course, of what we feel is most essential for birth givers and families as they welcome new life into the world. So we all have our own little touch and uniqueness and specialness. And so as a birth doula, I'm there to help educate the parents and whoever else might be involved in the growing family to navigate, what their priority is in this birth and what they might know to expect in this birth. With the technology that we have and the modernization that we have information that can help us birth really safely and effectively with what we're giving, because this baby's their own energy too. And then as a postpartum doula, I'm there after baby's born for however long the family would like. For my services, like I offer for the first year, they're welcome to hire me, and I help navigate and soften the change of life that is for everyone, and to help mom recover faster. And usually, and that's where we talk about privilege too, is, depending on how much true recovery and downtime she has, is essential for her health and the family's health. Because I believe when mom is well, when the birth giver is well, everyone is well. And wellness takes all different shapes and forms and sizes. And health looks differently for different families and different, diagnoses and everything that comes in our life. But health and wellness, they go hand in hand. And when mom is well, I believe she's really the head of household. And everything else I wish to say effortlessly, but it's not. But it really falls into place. And there's like this sense of security and safety within the family when the matriarch is well in her whole sense of self.
Yes. And that is something that I advocate for very much, which is to move away from the stereotypical belief that centering yourself is selfish.
Right.
Because this process of bringing a new life into the world can be traumatic. It can be beautiful. It can be many things, but your work is so powerful because it creates some continuity, safety, and ease for the family as they welcome a child.
Yeah.
And afterwards, right, there's a whole set of things that can happen. I think you shared with me that postpartum is forever.
Yes.
And I struggled with just the pelvic floor after having 3 natural births with my children. And I know that's something you help women with. And I know that it can be, from my own experience, secretly disruptive when we're managing our households. And like you said, taking care of yourself after birth. There's taking care of your body. And, as that statistic, like having to go back to work, perhaps. So what are some ideas or tools that you can offer in terms of awareness, et cetera, around seeking help for the body for that time postpartum so that the day-to-day becomes a bit gentler for moms and women?
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you so much for sharing about your pelvic floor journey too. Just even touching on it and just sharing that the pelvic floor was before. And that's not what you said, but that was my interpretation. And it doesn't matter how you birth, how many children someone has, the muscle structure of the pelvic floor gets taxed and gravity's not helping. So time is not helping us. And in other countries like the Netherlands, Germany, France, Italy, it is part of the 6-week checkup is a referral to a pelvic floor physical therapist. So it's very normalized in other countries, just not in ours yet. And sadly, like doula support, and we didn't really touch on midwifery yet, midwifery support and pelvic floor physical therapists, like really having a functioning physiologically, functioning well body is something that we have to advocate for in America. So it takes a conversation like this on a podcast that maybe like my conversation with you doesn't totally fit your mold, but it's essential to have these conversations because they all shape our framework for our daily lives, right?
But I think it's important to normalize, which is why I invited you on, because your wisdom and experience with women, right? Like we often suffer in silence, and that affects our ability to maintain our household. It affects our ability to show up at work. It affects our ability to parent if secretly we're worried about how our bodies are functioning. We're worried about our mental health. The birthing process disrupts so many hormones, all the things. So I see it as aligned because we really have to move on from birth and still show up like we never had a baby to begin with.
Completely. Life was just this way always. Yeah. And it's a domino effect that happens. Like you said, like it shows up in different areas, and that's a domino effect. And so when it comes to like postpartum healing, and postpartum, I'm talking about like maybe the first 6 weeks is super gentle. And one of my favorite things that I will say forever, you can do this as soon as you want to after having a baby, is putting your legs up a wall or just elevating the legs higher than the heart and head. And this not only helps blood flow and balance the energy in the body, but also it supports the uterus and pelvic floor to heal really well. And that can be done forever, and it can be done as soon as someone wants to after having baby. It's a very passive way to actually be taking great care of yourself. And 30 seconds up to 8 minutes or so does wonders, truly. So it doesn't have to be a very long time at all. And we have in Metro Detroit, especially, but it's growing more and more, of course, across our country, our pelvic floor physical therapists. And until you've had an assessment and an appointment with a pelvic floor physical therapist that specializes in female anatomy, you have never gathered such useful information about the muscle skeletal structure of how you operate. When I first went to my pelvic floor physical therapist, it was 5 years after the birth of my last child. And statistically, women go see a pelvic floor physical therapist when their last child is between 5 to 8 years old. So yes, right?
I'm raising my hand for for those of you who are listening.
Yeah. So we're both in that group. And so there's correlations of like, well, that's when kids are typically in school full day. And then finally, as an adult, you're like, wait, like my symptoms are not going away. And so some of those symptoms, or they might be like actually more problematic now that there's space between ourselves as the parent and the child, right? Or children. There's more space in the time of the day to have this time to reflect. So some symptoms that are maybe normal, but not healthy and not okay, can probably be healed through non-surgical methods are like waking up in the middle of the night to urinate. That is a normal response, but not healthy and not okay. And feeling a sense of heaviness. So as the day goes on, so maybe you walk around for your job, or maybe you walk in nature and then you notice the sense of heaviness down below. That is a sign that there's maybe some pelvic weakness or overstraining. And what are some other signs? A sense of urgency. So an urgency to use the restroom, like, I got to go now. That's normal, but not healthy and not okay. There's something that can probably be done to soften that or to have it be recovered. And in regard to the pelvic floor, the transverse abdominals are the deepest abdominal walls in our torso. And you can think of them as the corset. They work hand in hand with the pelvic floor. And so if you feel like a bloating belly as you get further along through your day, there might be some intra-abdominal pressure that can be resolved through going to see a pelvic floor physical therapist. But they are a great resource. And it's a world of knowledge that we just aren't gifted as women and young females, like at the menstruation age, to just learn this kind of information about their bodies, of what is the pelvic floor? How do I know when it's engaged and how do I know when it's released? Those two kinds of concepts. The listeners even today might be like, I don't even know what you mean, Elise, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
it's something that we should. I don't like to should on anyone, but it's something that we ought to know just for our bodies, of like basic 101 function.
Yeah, it's definitely a gap in our education for sure. And I'm so glad that you went through that, just discussing it, because it will allow people to now go out and seek more information if that applies to them, which it may.
Yeah, it absolutely may. And it doesn't, I really believe it won't really hurt anything to get assessed and to get curious about how your body works. It's only going to give you more knowledge to work from. And it truly can be very empowering, because with my energy mind and experiences, when we're tapping into this part of our body, and it might be shut down for a variety of reasons, but when we reawaken this part of our body in a healthy, functional way, it creates more self-confidence. It creates more creativity. There's like this all sensualness, not to be confused with sexual, but sensual, like tapping into all of our senses, listening, hearing, sound, maybe art, maybe music, just bringing all of our senses, embodying into our lives, that can be really enriching.
Yeah, I love that because, with our lack of time in nature these days, some of that can be tampered and turned off.
Yeah.
I want to switch now to talking about preparing for a baby and the nesting phase, which you and I have talked about before. As a professional organizer, I often see folks getting ready and we think that it's gathering all the right objects and things and baby gear. But I get a sense from you that it's not 100% about the objects, the nesting phase.
Yes. Yeah. And they do go hand in hand. And this is where we can get back into intuition and inner knowing. Almost all the birth women that I've worked with have this sense of nesting, and it usually shows up around weeks 36. So about a month before baby arrives earthside. And nesting, we think, like you said, is gathering of the things. It's like the bed is ready, all the blankets, all the diapers, all the wipes. We have this organization that needs to happen to feel secure and to feel like, okay, I have my quarters where baby can come into this world and we are ready. And that is absolutely necessary for birth giver to have a sense of calmness, because we should feel safe and secure and ready in our environment. There's also pieces that are not tactile or material that can really place a great sense of calm and security and preparedness for life when baby's earthside. And that's maybe hiring a postpartum doula, or if there's other children in the household that are rather young, maybe there's other people coming in, babysitters, aunts, uncles, family, friends, grandparents that step in periodically to engage with older children so that they have adults that they can go to while mom and maybe dad or whoever is taking care of little baby. Because baby needs a lot of birth giver mom time to build a strong sense of bond and relationship building. And for her to, if she's breastfeeding, to have her milk come in. And it's such a short period of time in life, but it takes a lot of that quality kind of downtime. It seems like downtime to us because that's our culture, is when we're sitting, we call it downtime.
But post baby is not. There's a lot of
activity going on. There's a lot of activity going on. Yeah. Oxytocin is flowing through both mom and baby, and whoever else is holding baby too, siblings, dad, other mom, like who knows who else is in the space that's going to care and love this child. But those things are essential for that time. And there's other ideas of support that are invisible, like meal trains, having somebody else make loving, nourishing meals to drop off. And that's usually like a friend or family member can easily start that list and have it perpetuate for at least 6 months. It's not the first 4 weeks or the first 6 weeks. It's like 6+ months. I taught and encourage my moms to have a calendar that goes through 8 months at least, so that people can see, oh, I can do it more than once and I don't have to do it right away. I can wait till, 3 months from now and pop in. And they're not seeing baby or mom, like
just dropping off.
They're just there to drop off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And that is the last area I want to talk with you about, because you have a very strong sense of community, the importance of women's circles and gathering and just group experiences to support our journey as women.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, science shows that when we gather together with a purpose, it sparks happiness and it gives us a sense of purpose in life. So tell me a little bit about how you, Elise, foster this as a business owner and as a woman entering this middle phase of life.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for asking. So in business, I teach women's circles in person, specifically right now for fertility and in pregnancy, and doing one-on-one services for birth doula and postpartum. So holding space for families and being there in that one-to-one support. And then also I volunteer and donor with Birth Detroit, and they're building the first freestanding birth center in the city and the first Black-led birth center in Michigan. And it's a really big deal that this is happening, and the framework for it is truly just the foundation of what is to come for Birth Detroit and the vision of all the co-founders. It's very exciting to center and support Detroiters and give families the essential care that is sadly not available to them. We have some great hospitals and birthing practices in our area, but often the accessibility for Detroiters in particular is not there. And it's essential. There's loads of longitudinal studies and statistics that as a patient, it is essential to have a provider that looks like us. And when that doesn't happen, there can be a hierarchy that plays out. There can be just miscommunication that isn't on purpose, but it happens. There's assumptions that are made. So with this Black-led birth center centered in Detroit, providing support for all birthing people will create a sense of, it already is creating a sense of community and a powerful force that will, I believe, truly make Detroit and the suburb area, Metro Detroit, one of the best and safest places to birth, because 80% of women can birth in a birth center. That's just not a statistic that is shouted out loud enough, because it's pushed down in administrations within hospital settings, even within hospital settings that have midwifery care. It's really messed up, to say the least.
And I love that you bring up Birth Detroit, because it is an organization that I feel passionate about and in support of as well. And so I appreciate that you donate your time and energy to supporting women in the city of Detroit. How do you just build in this sense of community in your personal life outside of our standard spa days and getting together with drinks with friends? Like, how do you build community for yourself now that we are entering midlife and friends seem few and far between on occasion?
Yeah, that's such a great question. The friends few and far between really sticks out to me. And that's, so for me, my community, I feel, is smaller than maybe I thought it would be, or whatever thing I thought I would be at this point in time. So I think one of the things that maybe COVID gifted us is focusing on who is in our circle, right? And that circle might change, it ebbs and flows, but it's me taking accountability and responsibility to reach out to friends like you and check in and see when we can get coffee again and when we can regroup and touch base. It's me going to other local providers, because I really focus on in-person connection, especially right now, and especially for moms. But for me to go out and support my local other ladies who are offering, maybe a yoga class, maybe it's a Pilates class, maybe they're doing like a women's circle for new moon phase type of thing. But just me stepping out of maybe my perceived comfort zone and just making sure that I'm supporting the community so that it also supports me. It's the only way it goes around.
Yeah. And I think that that's an important takeaway, right? That it is reciprocal, because we often think that if we put ourselves first or take time to go out and connect with others, that perhaps our children or our partner are losing out in some way when we take time to really fill our cup and connect with others. But it is essential for our mental health and for continuing those bonds, I think, in particular, as we move into midlife.
Yeah. And it's quality over quantity, right? If we haven't realized that by now, like, this is the time. It's about the quality, like who's in your life, who do you want to nourish, and nurture the relationship, and maybe who is not so much, or maybe who's just down for a good time and you can count on them for a good time out. But the nourishing and nurturing relationships, those take effort on both sides. And that has to be acknowledged from the sense of self of like, am I willing to put time and energy into this relationship? Am I willing to fight for it if I feel maybe they're off doing other things with other people? And I'm like, hey, what about me?
I love it. Well, we will connect in person soon, Elise. Definitely. Yes. So as we wrap up, I get to ask you, what's one way that organization shows up in your life now? And it can be kind of a creative, out of the box way if you'd like, as an adult.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's quite out of the box, but I feel like you were part of the inspiration, or at least the affirmation, for having my kids, because they're at teen and preteen ages, is I'm really focused on, this is part of my organization that makes me feel good, is having them write their own lists for the things that they have to do per day or on a weekly basis, or like for trips, that type of thing. But just really stepping back, because that takes great effort on our part as parents to not micromanage. Like I've heard you talk about in past podcasts, and I'm sure we've had private conversations where it's, you have them do the legwork, and then we're going to like check in and go through it with them and, make sure that they actually are doing what they need to do to have the fullest, the fullest experience. But that I feel is the best part of my day, is just watching my kids do what I feel they need to do and they're doing it, and not having to intervene so much.
That's a great example or way of sharing, because what you're doing is you're passing along your skills of organization to the next generation.
Right? Yeah. Because I don't want to do that forever. That intensely of the overwatching and, well, let me just do it, because it would be faster if I just did it.
Yes.
And it would be the way that I want, but it's okay for them to do it their way.
I think my kids have started hearing me say, that's part of your mental load, my dear, not mine. I don't want to continue to keep thinking about this for you. How about you take charge of it? And that's a lesson that they're learning in our household is that phrase mental load, and how they can start to carry their own.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Yeah. Because now they're building on that reflective, noticing what is actually their thought and not somebody else's.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or an expectation they think somebody else might have on them.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Elise. It was such a joy to talk to you. I want you to tell everyone how to connect with you and get in touch. I know through the Birth Humanity website, you have YouTube videos for yoga and wellness. You have online resources for pelvic floor support. And then you connect also for one-to-one conversations. So yeah, give the people all the details.
Oh, thanks. You hit the nail on the head with so many of them. So birthhumanity.com. And then I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Birth Humanity. So feel free to connect with me and drop me a line anytime. And then I do in-person yoga classes for pregnancy and fertility in West Bloomfield right now. And hopefully that'll grow over time as more and more people come out and get back into in-person experiences.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Amelia. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, y'all. I'd be honored if you'd take 3 minutes to leave a review of this podcast. Your time is precious, and by leaving a review, a pleasant solution will reach more listeners and lives. I'd also love to hear your feedback and share your review on a future episode. Talk to y'all soon, and remember, you are more organized than you think.